January is just around the corner. Do you know where your staff are? Have you invited last year's standouts back? How many are excited to return? How many haven't yet responded? What are you doing to set yourself up for success for this season's staff recruiting? Well, buckle up, folks, because we've got a star-studded panel chiming in on survey data. This is the Day Camp Pod.
This is the Day Camp Pod from Go Camp Pro, bringing you the best ideas, strategies, and discussions in the day camp industry. You can find our show notes at daycamppodcast.com.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source for recreation solutions that will ensure that your camp thrives. Explore their website today at CRS4Rec. CRS is serious about fun. Scheduling shouldn't be so difficult and take as much time as it does. Come check out Camptivities to learn all about their scheduling tools, and they're specifically designed for camps by camp people. Save time, get rid of the mistakes, and get back to enjoying your summer. Find out more at camptivities.com. Let me tell you about CampMinder, the #1 camp database in the world. It has the most robust offerings of service features found anywhere. Every feature works together to create a full, seamless system that helps your camp office run more efficiently while giving your camp family state-of-the-art communication and financial tools. Check out the details at campminder.com.
Welcome back to the Day Camp Pod, the place where camp pros come to talk about what's working and what's not and where we're headed next. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
And today we're diving back into the hot topic of staffing. The first of our three guests is no stranger to the challenges of camp staffing, Dan Weir. Dan has spent decades in the trenches of camp leadership and has been visiting camps, collecting and analyzing data on what's really going on behind the scenes of camps across the country, or at least what people are complaining about. He's here to give us the surprising trends and maybe, just maybe, some solutions on the staffing puzzle. Next, we got Schott, who brings the boom and the creativity that camps need now more than ever. Jack's the guy who's constantly asking, what if we did this differently? His past work on the front line, as with his most recent work as a cross-country staff trainer, makes him the perfect voice to help us figure out and think outside the box when it comes to hiring, training, and retaining people who make things happen for us. And finally, we welcome back a guy who knows staffing inside and out, Justin Pritikin. Justin's in the thick of it as a Gen Z camp director working with Gen Z staff. He's got firsthand experience with unique challenges from burnout to boundaries, and he's passionate about finding real-world solutions. If Justin could talk about staffing all day, he would, but we only have an hour. So let's kick things off. My question is, why come up with a staffing survey in the fall when there's not much staffing going on? Like, what prompted you to come up with this?
Yeah, the story behind this. So the truth is that consultants call each other to compare notes from time to time. And so one of the people I love calling and having, 1 to 2 hour conversations with is Jack.
Don't
Schott.
Call me a consultant. Don't call me a consultant.
Yeah, I know. I actually hate the word
consultant. You can't pay me to do consultant. You can pay me to do training. I'll show up to your camp. I'll do some training. You can call me and I can help, but don't call me a consultant. Don't put me in your bucket.
If
I look up your tax documents, you are classified as a consultant. I don't hate the word too. Just want to put that out there. But if I look up your tax documents. So anyway, so we call each other all the time. And I was driving back from Maine, and I had a long trip back, and we were talking about staffing because I just led a session on staffing and trends I was seeing compared to the conversations Jack was having. I was like, we should basically just do a staffing survey to see where folks are at, because this is still a conversation, even though we feel like the tide shifted. And basically, Jack and I went back and forth on this survey of what questions to ask to get real meaningful content that you could take action on and basically guide folks with. And we were just shocked at what was coming out. And so the survey is still open today. It's a little premature for us to do this, but because of the holiday rush, and we just want to make sure people see it. And then we're also going to do a webinar on it on January 9th as well too. And that's all free.
Well, all right, so take us through this, Dan.
Yeah. Here, so I'm going to share my screen. We're going to, if you're watching on YouTube, you could watch it, but according to everybody, nobody watches on YouTube. So I highly recommend going back to the YouTube if you want to watch it twice.
Well, and if you go back to YouTube, you can watch a really good one with Justin from last spring, by the way.
And don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps Sandra and Andy out. They'll feel better. They don't get paid for this, but it does feel good when your likes and your subscribes go up. Just being honest. Come on.
Smash that subscribe button. Yeah. I'll digress with the story at the end. I'm using ChatGPT to basically summarize the podcast my 11-year-old daughter watches, which is really funny on their using YouTube transcripts. But yeah, so let's talk about the staffing survey. So basically, if you go to daycampcommunity.com/staff survey, you can access the survey. It'll be up until the end of December. Also access the link to the free webinar we're going to put out there. And it'll also be in the show notes because Matt is a saint who edits this podcast. It takes about 8 to 10 minutes to fill out the survey. And if you fill it out, we're going to send you all the data. So if you're a nerd like me, you can run a pivot table. And so, and if you don't know how to run a pivot table, ChatGPT can help you with that as well too. So, but what we're trying to basically do is give you all the information that we're getting so you can form your own analysis on it. For the sake of this conversation now, what we're really going to focus on is the 66 day camp responses that we have. So we have had 195 responses total of the survey, but we really are going to focus on the 54 nonprofit day camps and the 12 privately owned day camps responses. And that's really what we're going to do. And I'm going to be basically showing the data to the group, explaining the question a little bit, and then stop talking and let everyone dissect and argue. And
you think that percentage, 12 out of 50, 12 out of 66, you think that's probably like a national slice, right? Like a percentage of private versus nonprofit?
You're so right. So somebody was asking me to describe the camp industry, and I said it's kind of like Game of Thrones, where there's like Jewish camping over here, there's YMCA camping over here, there's privately owned camping over here, and depending on where you go in the country, it's more saturated. So I do feel like there's 20,000 camps in the country, and there's a lot more day camps than we ever talk about. And when we talk about that, we also talk about essentially that it really comes down to the sections. So like New York, New Jersey has a lot of privately owned day camps, that metro area. You go more into the Midwest, you go more into the South, it's more nonprofit based. But I still think a core of the practices are the same. It's just almost like the focuses can be different at times. And I'm sure Jack and I are going to bring that up as we talk
But
further.
also people like Sam, who's on this Zoom, she has far different responsibilities throughout the camping, the school year, right? So whereas the private camp people can be focused on it throughout the time, nonprofit folks, I mean, many of them are lifeguarding pools or running preschools or whatever.
Before and after school.
Zach, right? Yeah, school age childcare. Yeah, but that's actually why I started Day Camp Community. I was just so amazed at these folks ending their childcare on a Friday and then starting their day camp on a Monday, and I have nothing but empathy for them. My biggest joke when I'm doing these conferences, the Y Dan Camp conferences in particular, is that how many titles do you have in your name? I mean, sorry, how many commas do you have in your title? Just because there's just constant job responsibilities being thrown on these people in a different way that from the privately owned sector.
Absolutely. At one point, I was doing art, cooking, you name it. I think I had like 10 different things they had me doing. Now I'm down to 4, so that's not bad.
That's so funny. Great. So I'm going to walk us through each section. We're going to go into trends first, and then I'm going to throw our first one out there. So the first trend is, as of today, what percentage of summer staff positions are filled? So when we ask 66 day camps, 54 of them nonprofit, 12 of them for profit, they say, about half of them say only 0 to 20% of positions are filled. And then it's 40 to 60 is about 20% of the camps and onward. And when you really look at it, only about 12% of camps are like nearly done. Yeah.
So I want to zoom back out. Andy said, why bother talking about staffing now? And Justin's going to tell us in a second about how many choices he can make right now at Everwood Day Camp because he has huge demand for staff that change the way he's thinking about running camp, right? And so, like, I think that every camp has a million different things going on, right? We just talked about it. The incentives are different for Sandra than they are for Andy to do different things, right? Because of where funding comes from, because of what the mission of camp is, because of whatever. And at the end of the day, there's really 3 big categories that I think camps need to fill. And the nonprofit camps have to fundraise to make a bunch of money. It's just a reality. And so every decision has to come back through the frame of like, how am I going to put money into the pocket? At the Y, it's like margin moves mission or whatever, right? But like that is a reality. And that means we're going to make choices that mean that we can raise more money, period. We have to. And that camp doesn't get to exist tomorrow if we don't do that. The second thing is like when we run a fee for service model, like at Liberty Lake, Andy needs to make sure parents are paying to send their kids to camp, period. That is what needs to happen for camp to exist tomorrow. Without that, camp doesn't get to exist. He makes decisions based on that. It changes what the brochure looks like. It changes what activities he runs. It changes whatever. Because Andy's a great camp director, every time he wants to make a change, he thinks about how are parents going to think about this, not just how our kids going to think about this. Of course, that is true. That is also true at nonprofit camps that are largely funded through donations. But like donations have to come first if that's where most of your money comes from. And we can have debates about that. But the last thing is all of the changes that we want to make come down to, can we get 16-year-olds, can we get 18-year-olds to be awesome at them? Because our camps are run largely every day by 17-year-olds. If the 17-year-olds walked out tomorrow, we wouldn't have camp, right? And so why bother with the staffing survey? It's because if we know we have large demand for staff right now, it makes making changes easier. Justin just told me he's going to have more staffing. He's going to have more staff training this summer. He's able to not hire staff back that he doesn't think are great. He can have good staff not come back because he has potential great staff coming in the door. And so like framing this whole thing out, it's December. I totally understand why it's hard to focus on staffing. You have to focus on the money. Largely, you have to focus on the money first, get that. After that, it's how do I get staff in the door to run our programs. That's why I think the staffing survey matters, is so we can get a view of what all that is.
Well, I wish there was a question before the first question, Dan. That was, when do you ask your staff back? Because I find that fascinating. I've talked to day camps that literally invite their staff back like the next week after camp ends. And I just believe that people have busy lives and they're telling you how they feel at that moment, and that it's a nice barometer, but to make real big decisions based on what people are telling you in the fall is a little suspect. And trying to find new people at this point is ridiculous, because so much can happen between the fall and June 15th or whatever. So I just think that in doing this over all these years, and I think it's only gotten worse, that people that tell you how they feel. Okay, if I'm asking them in October, hey, you want to come back next summer? Sure. All right. I mean, but a million things could happen between then for that person. What is actually the chance of that person returning in June? That person says sure in October.
Justin, what you got? Come on, you raise your hand.
So much. I think that's the longest I've ever sat still and not talked. 20 minutes. So I think camps are asking people back earlier, from what I've heard, because they're freaked out about how hard it is to staff, because they can't staff. And so the sooner they can start figuring things out, the better has been the generic thing. I want to talk more about what Jack was talking about. I think like the camps that are like in the metrics of like 80 to 90% staff, these are those camps. Why is it important to talk about staffing now? Because we don't recruit talent. We have to compete for it. And currently the best staff that were at our camp, as well as like the best potential staff in the real world, are free agents. They're evaluating us. We're evaluating them. They're looking at internships, other jobs, vacations, other opportunities. And we need to be starting the Mets Juan Soto process and not be just letting it happen.
Yeah, but like Juan Soto, some people are just going to go where the most money is, by the way.
But here's my counter to that. So what's been really cool about working and like moving to Massachusetts and like whole new area is I get applications and have interviews with people who are from other camps, whether they moved to Massachusetts recently or are leaving a camp in the area. And staff aren't leaving for better pay, Andy. They're leaving for better leadership. The people who want to work at camp understand it's not that well paying.
My situation is like yours, Justin, right now. I've got about 80% that 80 to 90 return every year, but I added a new camp. So our whole HR system changed to online finally. But the problem with that is they can't sign their paperwork until April 1st. But I always send out the, are you returning in December? And then start talking to them up until April 1st. They're going to have to do a whole new system. They're going to have a profile and all that, and they get to build. So I'll do baby steps that way. But I usually get 100 to 200 applicants to fill maybe 20 spots. So right now I'm in a good place, but that could change next year.
Well, and I like Andy's point. That's like people are flakes. They're flaky, right? It's like, yeah, you're gonna sign up now, and then you're still gonna show up in June. Maybe not.
In an
Maybe not.
at will piece of paper, terms of agreement.
Totally agree. And Andy, you have the confidence that you believe that you're going to be able to get enough staff regardless, right? So it's not that my point is not that we need to have staff signed up. Like the first part of the survey was like, how many staff are signed up right now for how full are you in terms of staff right now? My point is not that we need to be at 100% full. My point is that we need to be understanding where we're at so we can have the confidence to make changes in the future that we believe will matter, right? That we can increase staff training if we want to, or we can change the structure of the day and not think that the staff will revolt because we have confidence that we're in demand enough that enough people will show up. And what that means for you might mean 90% full, or it might mean that I know sort of that my staff are likely to come back. Like I was at Liberty Lake this summer. Andy had a ton of really awesome committed staff. I bet a lot of them returned because they loved working there because it was fun.
Just letting that breathe for a second. So the next question I think plays into the conversation we've all been having. So for me, I view everything as a cycle, right? You get a camper, you get them to a CIT, you get them to a staff member, you get them to alumni, they have a kid, then they come back. That kid comes back to camp. And it's this perpetual cycle. And it's about kind of moving people along, right? So the question is, compared to this time last year, where are you with staffing? 80% of people said they are exactly where they were last year, stayed the same. 12% said they're further ahead. And 5% said they're behind. And so for me, like I know a lot of folks, like Sam and I were talking earlier, have a lot of commas in their job title, but it's about rhythm. And if you can stay ahead of where you are this time last year, right? Maybe you don't have the time to strike the deal of the Juan Soto, right? Where they basically courted him for months. They started like Mets started courting him in July for a November, December deal, right? But
Isn't
you
that
should
illegal?
stay.
You shouldn't do that.
I don't know. Hey, you're one burr over, right? But yeah, it's all good. But yeah, people, I'm gonna stop talking.
All right. Well, I don't know. This is not that surprising, Dan. I think it's just go to the next slide.
Okay, sounds good. All right.
I can make a point on this. I think there's something here. I think that for the folks that are behind or folks who want to get ahead, tools that reduce friction, scheduling apps, instant communication platforms, camper management softwares. I think 80% of staffing problems, especially when asking people back and hiring people now, it stems from poor onboarding and just the overall process of that. And so just figuring out how to streamline that to make it better so you can be more effective in the spring.
Well, why don't we just plug our friend Eric Wittenberg, because Justin uses Camper Machine, and that's quite a nice layout of his onboarding.
Let's put the ad break right here.
Yeah. No, I mean let's talk about I mean, whether it's Wittenberg's product or it's your own CRM. I actually, Justin, I don't know if you noticed, I applied to your camp this week. I was sitting with another.
I saw you didn't answer my email, so you got the next one.
Yes, you did. Yeah, it was good. It was great. So I was sitting with a camp, helping them implement Camper Machine, and was explaining like the prospect aspect of this, meaning that like this is sales. Like there is a part of hiring that is sales, and it's about speed. And we were looking at it, and I was like, look, this form only gets your name, email, and phone number. That's all you need to do an interview, to do a conversation, right? To hook them in. And you all know you're better on the phone because you're so charismatic and you can get them to like really buy into you. And they're like, oh, it makes sense. And so I filled out Everwood Day Camp's staff interest form, and I instantly got an email back saying, let's schedule an interview. And that was clearly the Camper Machine, right? And then I intentionally did not submit an interview. So then I actually got a follow-up 2 days later, which was like, if you're still interested in applying this, and that's great. I mean, that's how busy people are. So when we talk about,
and he's going to get another one in 2 that says, hey, seems like you're not interested.
And
wait, Andy, hold up for a second, boss. Email in 2 days that says, hey, it doesn't seem like you're that interested in applying. If anything's going to change, here's my link, here's my contact information, schedule an interview. And then it sends me an email that just happened. So then I can click on this profile, see where they're from, see who they are, and see if they're worth me calling, because we do close really well on the phone, on Zoom, etc.
Yeah, I was going to say that the best part of that whole scenario is that Justin didn't have to actually do anything. It was all robot until the last step there. I've said it before on this podcast. I'll say it again. At Six Flags down the road from Liberty Lake, people apply with an interest form, like we're talking about, and their auto emailer says, "You're hired. Come and fill out your paperwork." And that's where they actually get to talk to you. So that's your competition, going back to what Justin's saying. Like, they're free agents and we got a lot of competition.
Scheduling affects every camper and every staff member's summer. It's easy to make mistakes. It takes a ton of time. Bottom line, scheduling is hard, and it doesn't have to be. Let Camptivities help you create a balanced, engaging schedule without the mistakes and without those long days and late nights. Camptivities does it all for day camps. Auto scheduling, camper and group scheduling, elective scheduling, manual adjustments, over 60 different reports, tons of customizable settings, and so much more. So don't wait until the new year. Now is the time to find a better way to schedule and save 15% on your first year. That's right, baby. The folks at Camptivities would love to show you the next big thing in camp. So get away from your desk and get back outside and play with the kids at camp. Go to camptivities.com. As a camp director, you're a leader of your camp and a pillar in your community. When your customers put tremendous trust in you, CampMinder's powerful management software tools deliver the day-to-day task support that helps you make every touchpoint moment memorable and every summer stellar. CampMinder has the most user-friendly platform for both your staff and your parents, and is backed by a team of crafty engineers and customer service associates who are constantly thinking of ways to optimize your camp's database, communication, and financial management. With state-of-the-art app for your camp families and an API available for third-party softwares, CampMinder is always evolving elite summer camp software. Check them out today at campminder.com.
All right, next slide. So what percentage of your staff from last year are returning this year? The largest amount, meaning the frequent answer, was 50%. The lowest was 3%. The highest was 90%, meaning that one camp has 3% staff retention, or anticipating that. Another camp has 90% staff retention, and the most frequent answer was 50%.
Again, I think that the timing of this data makes for shaky intel. In my experience over the years, if you can get a third to a half of the people say, yes, they're interested in coming back now, and then you're going to get another third or people event over the course of the next few months coming back and all. Like, if people are being honest with you, how can they absolutely commit to you in September and October? If they're a 17-year-old, if they're an 18-year-old, if they're a 19-year-old, they don't know where their lives are going to take them to. So that's nice that they want to come back, but that's really it. And then to throw paperwork at them and get them to sign up and actually do all that in the fall too, it's the same thing. Like, it's nice that they filled out that paperwork, but in this day and age, do people really give a crap about your paperwork? I don't know.
Let me add an addendum to my 90% earlier, my 80 to 90. Every 3 or so years is when I have a big influx or people leaving. They stay around 3 years. And we had that last year. So we had a lot of brand new happy people that still have energy last year. So I'm expecting this year to go well, because there is a curve. Yes.
Justin, can you give your synopsis on that, like when you talk about the lifespan of a staff person?
Right, the life cycle.
Yeah, well, I think going into the retention numbers and all that fun stuff that Dan just put up is, I think 80 to 90% of the people who have already said, yes, I would like to come back to Everwood Day Camp, or are our new applicants for Everwood Day Camp, are high schoolers. People in college who have complex things going on. They're people in high school who live local, who know they're going to be around in the summer, and if anything, might miss a week for a vacation, so they can commit. So it is worth start chipping the old paperwork block with 16, 17-year-olds because they're not good at it, even now. So I will argue that, Andy. But yeah, life cycle, I think it comes in 2s and 3s, depending on when you get hired and if you can stay for long. And when I think retention's becomes a bad metric. I mean, if Kentucky basketball wins the championship this year, the retention's going to be 0, right? Because everyone's going to leave. But that's not an indication of success. And so at Everwood, we hire so many 1-year 21-year-olds that I asked back, but I know there's no way they're coming back. They study X, Y, and
Right,
Z,
unless they're
and they're going to get an
educational
internship, right? So that's okay to me. I'm all about talent, and I'd rather have you for 1 year and you be a superstar than maybe shake 2 years out of you just because you're local, convenient, warm body, etc. So, but yeah, I think the average person comes in at 16, can commit to 17. It's 50-50 for 18, and then it's like 25-75 unless they're in that, like, I want to do this for the rest of my life kind of mentality.
I
That's
only
just
deal
like-
with the 18 and up. I won't take anybody under 18, but so far that's working. Doesn't mean it will forever.
Right.
And we're up.
So let's talk about CITs, because earlier we kind of talked about this pipeline, right? And again, we could talk about when we're running the survey. It's hard. If I ran when I run surveys in May, nobody fills them out. When I run a survey over the summer, I got to call you 3 times to get you to fill it out. So like there is no perfect time to run a survey. So, but what percentage of former CITs, counselors in training, will transition to staff positions this year? The highest frequent answer was 0. The lowest answer was 3, which technically 0 is lower than 3. And then the highest was 100. So
why do you think that 0 number is there, Dan?
I actually wrote an article on CIT programs, and I've done sessions at both Y camp conferences and the Jewish day camp conferences. And there's a lot of folks that day camp just kind of fizzles out around 12, and they don't have any CITs, or they have 1 CIT. And then that 1 CIT, because it's not a program, they're just kind of there, never comes back to become a staff member. So I actually see this a fair amount on the nonprofit camping side. And when I explain to directors this pipeline concept and how you can do this, you see an aha moment. You also see like a moment of like, oh, I wish I could do that, but I have too many commas in my title. But
well,
yeah.
And then there's also the day camps like in the Northeast that our friends are at that are predominantly Jewish. That the majority of those kids go off to sleepaway camps also. But I mean, at my camp, we do a really good job of retaining people all the way through. And it is quite an awesome pipeline. And if you can grow your own, why not? And it always amazes me, the sleepaway camps, our sleepaway camp friends who make their kids take a year off. Like, to me, that seems just like shooting yourself in the foot. Like, why would you do that?
My CITs are 14 to 17. That's my way of keeping the pipeline going, since I don't take them till they're 18. Otherwise, I lose them in the middle.
Well, I mean, I know that at least some people on this just love using sports analogies, and it's just like the CITs are the draft, right? We're just drafting, and of course you can trade your draft picks away, and you can not use them, and it's fine. Like, there are teams that win Super Bowls that trade the LA Rams traded their first round pick away for whatever 7 years and won the Super Bowl. So there's different ways to do this. Like, all of this to me comes back to like, I want to increase my confidence that I can make awesome changes for the coming summer based on the information that I have right now. And so like, if I need to increase my CIT program because I want that draft pipeline coming in and making sure that I know the people that are going to come in, then I want to focus on that. If I have tons of outside talent coming in, like Kentucky does in Kentucky basketball, it's like they're going to recruit really aggressively to have these single best people come in and be one and done, then we can do that. It takes a lot to be Kentucky basketball. You have to be extremely excellent for people to want to come to you. If you want to have a chance to compete at Davidson, you've got to grow your talent so that the seniors are awesome that come in, right? And so like, I think like there's a million ways to do this, and it's all about reducing anxiety around excellence when the kids arrive. And so again, this is why like I think it is worth it, even though a lot of people will flake on us between now and summer. I would love to be 120% staffed today, knowing that we're going to lose 25% of those people, and I'm just going to have to backfill a little bit. And maybe that's too much work, but it's not that much work once we're good at it. Whatever, set it up in ConvertKit. I don't care your system. The thing is, it isn't that much work to be building these systems that encourage action earlier so that we have less anxiety about the number of staff we're going to recruit. And like, we can send them a t-shirt, or we can send them a meme, or whatever the case is, so they feel guilty bailing on us. Because certainly contractually, they can do whatever they want. But like, 17-year-olds feel guilty when they bail. That's why they ghost instead of call. And the more we can increase how they feel guilty, not because we like want them to feel guilty, but because we want them to feel committed to us, then the more likely they're going to show up. And so anyway, I don't do it however you want. For me, I want to reduce as much anxiety as possible around who's going to actually show up. And to do that, I'm going to do a bunch of work now so that they do.
My only counter to Jack's idea that if we send them a shirt, they're not going to bail is like, young people ghost as just social habit now. I mean, if you match with someone on a dating app and you no longer find them attractive or whatever, which reason, you just stop talking to them. And that's kind of how hiring is now with how LinkedIn Indeed works is it's you're just swiping right all the time to see what sticks. And then it's like, whatever, this one's better than that one and I got that one, so I'm going to leave. Which is just why we need to be better at communicating to people and picking up on the trends and then making decisions and not waiting and getting caught with our pants down on the first day of staff training going, what if these 40 people show up? That is my biggest pet peeve in this industry right now, is people complaining about this. And yes, let's overhire now, and it's going to feel expensive, but understaffing is how camps will fail during the summer. It's not going to be a camper that destroys your camp. It's going to be a lack of staff, right? So just make the effort now, please.
But Dan, I think this goes back to one of the first things we said, which is everyone has Justin Pritikin focused on staffing, right? A lot of private day camps now have a person that is focused on staffing, right? It's not a team. And if you don't have that, and you don't have people that every single day are sending follow-up emails, text messaging people, and all that kind of thing, you're going to get beat. There's no doubt about it. And that's why when you look at that life cycle of what it takes to hire somebody and people are saying a month or so, that is why. It's because they just don't have the time and bandwidth to give it the attention that it really requires.
No, that you're hitting the core issue that I hear repeatedly from folks that are working in the nonprofit sector is I actually know how to do it. I just don't have the time and resources to do it. And to be frank, I've had to help some camp directors speak CEO, code switch. Like, hey, it's not 2015 anymore. This wasn't good in 2015, but today it's not working. And this is why we have those gaps. And frankly, being understaffed is not just about quality, it's also about risk management, right? Like there's so much of this, right? It's like, and I really feel for folks that know the solution, know something's wrong, and they don't have the permission.
Well, but it's also prioritization. And it's just disappointing. I'll say that Justin said it's his pet peeve. I find it disappointing that coming out of 2021, 22, which was so hard for everybody with staffing, that people don't realize that hiring staff is just as important as getting campers, right? We heard these stories about people taking less campers because they had less staff, right? Over these last 5 years. So, I mean, the focus that you put on recruiting campers, it should be the same as recruiting staff because it's equally as important for all.
And but what are we seeing in this industry right now, Andrew, is that people are struggling with both, right? Because they don't know how to tell the story of camp to either audience, and they have bad storytellers doing it maybe too. Right. And then we talk about how important it is to staff camp, but then there are camps that are still rigid and don't offer flexibility to young people where all they get to young people.
Yes,
and then they just blame these young people. Oh, these Gen Z, that's what like Gen X is not going to be any better. Right. And I just
Justin's talking specifically, I think, about a camp that
no, Andy, you just got
hundreds of
stop.
people.
You got to stop. You can't put anyone on blast. Can't put people on blast like that.
No.
Nameless.
I think the fun part about hiring at Everwood is like a lot of these people never worked at a camp before and are looking at camp and Walmart. And it's just like, what do I want to do with my summer kind of thing? And we are one of thousands of places, and we are a family. We are a traditional camp. It doesn't mean anything. Even in an area where camping is historically great, it doesn't mean anything to people looking for a job.
I'm still reflecting on. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Dan, push us through a few more of these, a few more stats from the survey, because the survey I think is useful in that it gives us sort of a picture of what other folks are up to, so that we can think about at each individual place, what do we need to do to be able to recruit more staff so that like Justin can fire someone if they just pull their phone out, right? Like a lot of people are like, I could never do that. All my staff are on the phone, but Justin's staff are full. He's got more staff than he specifically needs. He can fire someone, right? And I'm not saying we should be firing people all the time. I'm just saying it changes the dynamic. But fly us through a few more of these stats so we can see where we're at.
Oh man, it's like I almost teed you up in the chat. This is perfect. All right, so I'm going to cover like 3 groups and then we'll pause on the third one. So international staffing. I'm seeing more international staff creep into the day camp space. Wide over, most people are not, but the highest report answer was 95% of a day camp using international staffing, which is interesting. And I think of the friends from Jacobs Timberlake camps that run out in the Hamptons where you can't find a staff member because everyone's there's an overload of need for summer staff out there, and there's just frankly not enough people. When we look at where you get new staff from, this was interesting. By far and away, when we asked, what are your top 3 sources for seasonal staff? By far and away, the number one, it came in various ways, is word of mouth / referral. So at like high 80%. And that makes sense. That's what comes through, frankly, on getting campers too. Number 2, a distant number 2 and number 3, almost equal. I'd say like the just single digit percentiles, Indeed and Handshake, right? So your best people are connected to your current people is the overallness. And I'm sure we're going to talk about Indeed and Handshake as we go forward. And then this kind of gets at the heart of the issue that we were talking about, this one, and this might be a trigger stat for us as well. Do you anticipate being fully staffed by the start of camp, right? So this is actually where the survey is nice that it's months away. 95% of people are saying yes, but 5% of people are saying no, meaning that maybe you're the mindset that like you're never fully hired and you can always get more people in the door. Or maybe you are not believing that you can get there. Right? And then does that become a self-fulfilling prophecy? So that's 3 stats for us to digest before we move forward.
Negative energy. I think Indeed is useful. I wouldn't be pumping a ton of money into it, but I think it is useful for helping find some of those people who would have never thought to even look at your camp. And for a day camp, you could actually put in like the specific town or city that you're looking for to try to get people that way as well. It's mining. It's like going fishing, but it's a very small percentage that are going to come from it. But you can get some good ones.
I have 3 community colleges within half an hour of me. And so that's where I get a lot of the newbies, other than word of mouth, is through the community colleges.
I could go on like an hour-long rant, just like how to staff. And my thing on if Indeed is like, if you don't need it, don't use it, obviously. But there are ways to get exactly what you just said, Sandra, without using Indeed. That could be more effective at saying the right message to the right people at the right time, at the right place, that is more effective and is more like fishing. Because when you fish, you catch fish. When you try to fish in the Indeed pond, you get boots, trash, metal, guns. Like you just get junk, right? It's junk fishing. And so I think that where camps spend too much money and time on Indeed, just wasting time with it, and where you can do things better, more automated, more just how to recruit. And that's a different conversation. What I like to think about when I think about like if I were fully staffed type question, I think it's a great question. If you anticipate being that, is if someone were to bail the day before camp, what would I do to make sure that they were ready and working by day 2? How can I grab people as fast as possible if I have no reservoir of people waiting for me? Because not a lot of people are applying for camp, in my experience, like just through the formal methods of like Campminder application or interest form 2 days before camp, right? So if I had to lead generate the day before camp to get someone in for that first week, the first day is going to be tough. We're going to scrap together. We're going to be okay. But day 2, I have a trainee in place and we're going. What needs to be true for that to happen? What do I have to do? And it's like, if you don't have a system like that, and maybe your system is let's spend $1,000 on Indeed, and that's fine. Like that's an okay system. But what is your way to make that happen is something I would also keep in the back of my head.
I'm not as good at the internet as Justin. I'm just going to admit that I'm not as good at the internet as Justin. I'm better at the internet, is my guess, than the average camp director. But I'm not as good as Justin at the internet. And what Sandra said, so I'll leave I want to figure out how can I hire a Justin to help me be better at the internet so he can teach me, so I can learn, da, da, da. But what Sandra said is that the huge majority of her staff come from community colleges that are nearby, because you didn't say the second part, which is because you have built incredibly good relationships with a handful of influencers in those communities. And by influencers, I don't mean like TikTok people. I mean like the professor of whatever, or
Job
the
placement.
guy, job placement, the guy that works the front desk at the gym. I don't know,
Interns.
whoever the people are that make these things. And so it's like, but that stuff takes time over, and by time I really mean years of time. You get to do that, Sandra, because you've been working where you're at for a long time. And
Right.
and so like Dan, this is why we need your help so this is why Andy has a huge advantage. Sandra has like people that have longevity have huge advantage. So private camps have a huge advantage here because the owner tends to stick around for a long time because they're the owner. They invest, they stay, da da da. And then like if at a municipal camp, if municipal camps actually tend to do pretty well at this too, actually, like in terms of longevity compared to the Y, because maybe benefits are better, you're deeply embedded in the community. I don't know, but this is what I see is the reality is that Parks and Recs tend to have longer term stays, and we should do a survey on this, like how long have you been in the last job you're at, or whatever, because at the Y, the person running the day camp is not going to be running the day camp next year most of the time. At a association branch run in the khaki workout hell swim and gym, they are not going to be running the day camp the next year because they're looking for the next advancement. They're gonna move up. They're gonna go to a facility Y, like a day camp that has its own facility inside the Y. They're gonna go work.
Yeah, they're climbing the ladder, just like at JCCs and all that kind of stuff.
And so Dan, what we need is you, consultant Dan, and I say this with the most positive influence here, consultant Dan, to help us figure out for our industry, because of rising tide lifts all boats, how do you convince the CEO to make those jobs more interesting, more attractive to people to stick around for longer, so that the staff want to come back to work with Sandra, but Sandra is running the Y day camp or whatever. They want to come back and work with Justin, but Justin's never going to go take one of those jobs. Like Justin is a perfect example of this. He's 24 years old. He's a hotshot in our industry, and he would never consider a job like that, where he would have tons and tons of power to make tons of decisions inside of his camp. He would never consider it. He'd never consider it because the jobs are they're just not focused enough, and they're too hard. And so, Dan, we need your help is all I'm saying. This is my rant for you to help us.
Let me give it. I want to give some actionable stuff in here, right? A lot of nonprofit day camps in the room, meaning that you probably have a board or you have some form of advisory committee. I think in this day and age, right? Andy was listening to your day camp pod episode, most recent one. You talk about transparency being the Times word of 2023, right? If you could broadcast your moves to these advisory committees, meaning we have such a fear of getting fired. When I talk to folks in the nonprofit sector, sometimes that is the actual decision making is like based on not getting fired. Instead, if you can show your depth of thinking and your strategy, and you could show, hey, these are the places I'm trying to get kids or get campers or get staff from, because it's actually the same language, to be honest with you, campers and staff. It's just switching the words around and going to different places for day camps in particular for nonprofits. And you could broadcast that out to your advisory committee, be like, and go back to them and say, now what introductions can you help me make? So it's a simple thing. I find if you really make it easy for people to get involved, rather than just tell them that you're doing this, say, and now what introductions can you make for me? And all it is, I just need a simple email, because that email from that other person will actually get that door open and start the relationship further along than you going in cold. And I see Sam nodding her head, so I'm going to stop talking and then we'll cover the next stats. But
totally true.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, your go-to source for recreation solutions that will help ensure that your camp thrives this summer. Check out their inflatable aqua park courses for pools or lakes, the prime carts, the cool little go-kart things, the emergency alert and lightning detection systems. Whoa, the splash pads. Whoa, if you got the money for that, splash pads is the way to go with the heat we got. The Zoom Flume, a lot less money, and Cole talking about the most awesome water slip and slides that you could possibly get. The jumpers, okay, for bouncing all around the place, mini golf, the prefab cabins and pavilions and bathrooms, the shade structures. Lord, do we need shade structures these days? The shade structures cannot be beat. And of course, the playgrounds, including the ones with the cool musical components. Anyway, CRS Commercial Recreation Specialist, your go-to source. Explore their website today at crs4rec.com because CRS is serious about fun.
Yeah, keep it rolling.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's just look at the time. We got a few more areas to hit. So we asked people, what are your hardest roles to fill, basically? And counselors, overwhelmingly the top at 42%, followed by lifeguards at 37%. Other, which was like all over the map. So I'm not even going to report on that. Instructors at 14%, nurses at 11%, which is funny to me because I constantly hear about the battle for nurses, but it seems like counselors are the more harder for folks overall, which is interesting.
Nurses, it's just so much stuff for sleepaway camps.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's why this is the day camp pod. And then the mid-level managers right behind that, and then kitchen staff, which really varies. A lot of day camps on kitchens, but anything else to cover on this before we go into hiring and onboarding?
I just want to say two things. I mean, because I filled this thing out and I put counselors and I put instructors. Counselors, because when you have 16-year-olds that can make $16 an hour scooping ice cream, it makes it a hard sell for them to make less than half that working at your camp if they don't know what camp is. And instructors, I have found that coming out of the pandemic, that teachers are less excited about working 8 weeks out in the hot sun for you as they used to be. Justin, what are you motioning about?
Oh, well, this is where we could talk about like being good at the internet and like finding people and all that stuff. Is like, okay, who's a teacher who has a kid who could come to my camp for a reduced rate or for free? That's the benefit of coming to camp. If you're a teacher, that's the value proposition to them, right? So it's like, how do we find those people? Where are those people at? They have a digital footprint, and that's a findable thing. No. I think the 25-year-old teacher who's living in Philly who just wants to have a fun time, I don't think you're going to get them. I really don't, unless they went to camp and this is something they're seeking out. So I think that we need to narrow the scope of what we're looking for when we think about these things a bit, because I do think you're right, Andy. I do think times have changed.
So Justin, with the municipal or not, some of the nonprofits, our board Thursday night just said we could give camp free to the people who are working for their kids. And that hadn't been the case for years. So yes, it was the board that let us have this benefit that's going to get a lot more people in the door.
Oh my God. We know that childcare is an expensive thing and a pain in the ass for everyone. Now we can do it.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yep.
This is a resource that we should be using, I think, and advertising. How do we advertise that better? I don't know. That's for your camp to decide.
All right. So we have hiring, onboarding. We've got 4 key areas to debate. So, and the podcast with length, right? So we'll just do 3 minutes on each area. I'll keep a timer if that makes sense. So then, all right. So first area, on average, how long does it take from receiving an application to making a job offer? The top answer was 1 to 2 weeks with 40%. The second answer was 3 days to a week. And then some folks are taking, about 15% are taking over 2 weeks to a month. And then about 5%, 1 to 2 days. And the complete opposite, some people are taking a month or greater. And I talked to a friend that filled this out, and they said to me that, well, the verbal offer versus the paper offer is different. And so just so we're all clear, when I wrote this with Jack, we were talking about the verbal offer, meaning that like you like them, you're going to verbal offer them while you're checking out the references. And I think this is where it gets a little muddled for folks as well, too. But
well, I think it makes a difference when, again, going back to if you have the luxury of having someone like Justin that's doing your hiring and he's hiring people, he's interviewing people and he's making that decision right there. And he can do that. Versus if you have a team of people hiring and they need to go back and converse with people and you need to talk about it, like with a little subcommittee, and have it go through Congress first. So I think that's part of it. Because Justin, I mean, I think you hire a lot of people almost immediately, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the way I'd reframe the question from application to job offers, interview to job offer, like just once they book it, it's like in their court, right? And then I'll interview people and 3 hours later, I'll send them complete paperwork and everything if they're outstanding. If you're a 5-star, I want you at my camp. I think I hire most of my staff based on values because they're younger and teach them skills. So if you come in with skills and values, you're getting, especially if you can ride the bus from an hour away where we need you, you're getting a job offer in the interview and you're getting a paperwork follow-up immediately. I'm trying to close this as fast as possible.
The only ones I wait on are the middle kind of, they're all right. I don't know if I'll meet
Just
them.
say no.
There
Just
might be
say
somebody
no.
better. Always looking for that, but there could be someone better.
But
But I
well,
it's
also,
going to
that's
be
the
week
timing
4.
of it also, Sandra. That's the timing of it.
Yeah.
Like, I tell my hiring team, like, hiring too many people too early is not necessarily the best thing, because then you're
I do
getting
make
all
them
these applications
subs.
later.
I do make them subs, so I keep them hanging on the line. And usually my subs end up being that person that when someone quits, now they get in the second day camp because they're already set up.
Dan, in regard to what you mentioned about the references, because I hear a lot of people blaming, well, I got to check references. That's BS. Okay. We have an HR consultant we work with, and what she recommends is that you hire them contingent on their references, right? So you hire them, you send them all the paperwork, and then do the references. And if something comes back, then that's messed up. Then you unhire them. You don't blame that for taking 3 weeks.
Correct. Yeah. And then if you need to automate it, Checkster, I have no company affiliation with them, but Checkster, some automation. CampMinder has some built-in automation as well too. Like there's just ways to speed this up. You do want to check your references. It's like a 1% chance something comes back, but it's children's safety at the end of the day, right? Like you don't want to forego that.
No, you do have to check them. But my point is you don't have to wait until checking them to offer them, because it could take a long time to get references back. Plain and simple.
Well, you do have to check them depending on what state you're in, and also if you're ACA accredited. There's some states that don't require it, which is also a whole other episode. But yeah,
the learning here to me is if you're the young person or the person with less authority, and you're bumping into constantly, the hard part about getting people hired quickly is that the references aren't coming back, or anything at all. You're constantly bumping into the same problem, and you feel like you can't change it. Go to your boss and say, "Hey, this is a problem. Here's what I wish was different. Can we solve it?" And if you're the boss, tell your people, we want to be in the business of solving problems, because the reality is that most young people in these jobs do not feel comfortable going to their boss and telling them, can we change this thing? Because they assume that they don't know something that needs to be known. They assume that you have to check the references. They assume And so just like that's the meta learning here, is not the one specific thing about references, but that conversation needs to happen, because Justin can do that because Jamie and Dane trust him.
Next one. Which of the following apply to your camp staff's compensation policies? So this was a big like checkbox area. The top one, 80% of people are paying for staff orientation and training. So that means 20% are not paying for staff training. 75% of people are paying hourly, which means 25% of people are not paying hourly. 51% of folks are paying at or above the state/county minimum wage, which means the other half are not. 46% are paying at the federal minimum wage. That means the other half are not. We pay staff a flat stipend rate. 30% of people answered that. We use federal minimum wage exemption, so seasonal worker. 30% of people answered that. 30% of camp staff in a day camp setting are getting paid overtime. And 5% are paying additionally if you have like a multi-day travel program. And the way that question's kind of phrased, you can kind of get by. I mean, like if you don't have a multi-day travel program, you probably wouldn't answer that question. But yeah.
I think this slide is a great example of the fact that the vast majority of the people that responded are nonprofits, because private day camps are not paying people mostly at the federal minimum wage. Or at the local minimum wage either. They're using the exemption. But like Sam, and I know most of my municipal friends, they have to pay the prevailing minimum wage for everybody. So that's a big deal.
Wait, and if you're not paying for training, how are you? You're devaluing the training.
Well,
how can you not pay for training?
Sam, I'm paying you $2,500, and that includes training. That's what they're doing.
Wait, Andy, break this down for me, because this is something that my nonprofit friends, I grew up in nonprofit land. We like to say things like, well, of course the for-profit camps can do it. They have all this money. And there's this assumption that the staff are paid more at nonprofit camps. Break that down. What's the reality?
Well, I mean, there's 3 states in this country, New Jersey being one of them, and Los Angeles County, California, where you have to pay minimum wage to your camp staff. everybody else has a federal exemption. Okay. So these day camps that are charging over $10,000 for a day camp are charging people considerably less than the prevailing minimum wage. So they are making it on both ends.
Let's pause it for 2 seconds too. So this is a nationwide survey. Federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Minimum wage in New Jersey, what's like 15, 16? I don't. Yeah, right. So if you're in a state that just follows the federal, which is a lot of states that are not in the Northeast, it's $290 a week for a counselor pay, which is actually below market rate. So it's like it gets very fascinating when we start dissecting this. I think this is also too where I talk about why day camps. They have this membership model in terms of supporting the org. So sometimes they could take less money from their day camp to operate. So this is actually where I see day camps actually in the Y actually pay this hourly rate of like $15, $16 an hour.
Yeah, no, I see that at YMCA's most of the time. But that is not what private day camps generally do. And I'll tell you that this year, after 24 years at Liberty Lake, we are breaking out training for the first time. We used to have it part of the stipend, and we could do a little math problem to show you it if you asked, but I'm breaking it out this year just because I'm getting more and more feedback on the staff surveys that they feel like that they're getting gypped.
Something really cool that Dane does at Everwood is he pays people the Friday before the first week of camp. It's like a test of like the payroll system, but it's also to pay them for staff training. So there's like a version of that at Everwood because it feels good to like get that $250, whatever it is, for like having to show up in the heat and play my stupid games and listen to me like yell about like camper behavior.
Yeah. And also, so we're doing that also because that's another part of the compliance thing. Like Justin said up front, it's hard to get these young people to fill out their paperwork. But if they miss that first payroll with the orientation one, that's not as bad as missing the first one on week 2 or week 3, middle of summer.
Awesome. All right, 2 more areas to cover, and then we'll bring it to a close. So, what is the most common reason applicants reject your offer? Number 1, 43% offered a higher paying job elsewhere. So the money, right? Conflicts with summer availability or schedule was number 2 at 33%. Then a pretty distant off is the rest of them. At 9% is perceived lack of career development or growth opportunities. And in the like single digit, roughly under 5%, just under 5%, concerns about job responsibilities or workload, family or personal obligations, and then other, which is kind of like all over the place. And then
like you said, those are negligible.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's important. Like people are always worried about the workload, and that's pretty low. Like when we're doing the survey, but it's self-reported from camps. It's not from the camp staff side.
Well, I think that when you're interviewing people and you're offering them a job, they really have no idea. I mean, you could tell them, you could literally tell them flat out, this is going to be the hardest job you ever do in your entire life. And they're going to be like, yeah, sure.
I think this pay thing's great. I think it's true. And I think that's because camps don't tell people how much they're going to make until they send them a job offer. I think a lot of people duck talking about it in the interview because it's uncomfortable. And then they're like, wait, I'm only making this much money? And then they quit. And then they go find a job somewhere else. And I think that's how it would come out self-reported of offer to hire a job elsewhere. I think that if it's with something that you talk about, and like, if also, by the way, if you ask a 16-year-old, how much money do you want to make this summer? Their answers are insane. They have no idea. They either go, I don't know, or they say, wait, they say like 10 grand. And you're like, oh my God, that's awesome. And so, but I think as an industry, we do a bad job at communicating pay.
I want to go back to, this is predominantly nonprofit camps who are predominantly paying more than for-profit camps. This is a reality, right? And then they're saying that they believe that it is offered higher job paying, like they need more money is what they believe. At the same time, the for-profit camps are still being able to hire staff at a lower rate. And so like, to a certain extent, yes, I think the money is a reality. And to a certain extent, I think it's just like, that's what we think as camp directors. And it's easy to say that out loud. It's easy to say, well, we can't pay him that much. That's the story. But like, that's
exactly, Jack. That is the story. I spoke to a guy that has a similar job as Justin at a private day camp that charges way more than I do, who interviewed 900 staff last year to get the amount of staff. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not easy, but if you have people dedicated to it, That's the point again. If you have the resources, meaning the human resources, to be focused on this, then you can make it work.
God, how many times can you listen to a 16-year-old tell you that their biggest struggle is their AP class that they're in until you go crazy? I think, Jack, I think you're right. And I think where I'd combine both those points is like Andy and like these old folks are like, oh, this is the hardest job of your life. I'm going to make you think that and you're going to brush me off, but like, let me know. But then you like pay them like crap, comparatively speaking, to Walmart, where I went to Walmart local recently. And when you walk in, there's someone greeting you saying, would you like to work here? With like a pamphlet, and then on your cart there's an advertisement to work at Walmart, starting pay $17 an hour. It's aggressive, but people are desperate.
Justin,
and when you walk around Walmart, you're like, wait, I could just watch TikTok all the time and clock in some money. Like, it's pretty easy.
The air conditioning.
Yeah. So
Justin's not this is not an exact 1-to-1, but I want to hear your thought process on if you could pay your staff 30% more, but you'd have to have 30% fewer staff. Would you do that? Like, would you make the choice because you think you could have better staff at 30, like if you could pay them 30% more?
Oh man, this is an amazing thought experiment, and I've done it a bit. This becomes where like the talent to tasks ratio has to get figured out a bit, because I feel like in many cases like this, what ends up happening when like someone's like, oh yeah, we're not going to hire someone and say we're going to like split that salary to 2 other people, is like they make those people do menial tasks like cleaning bathrooms instead of like empowering them to build better experiences for like campers and staff, et cetera, like stuff like that. But yeah, oh my God, I'd love to run with a smaller team that was more, I think what the problem is for day camp, especially just a younger day camp like Everwood, and what would take more time, is just like the independence factor on like knowing how to do those things without the management, because there isn't that like long history of having seen this in multiple generations and just like long standing veterans. But yeah, I'd love to have that.
Andy, you shook your head.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think that we run camp with the amount of people that we need. I don't know where I would be clipping people off. I think in a younger kids group, I need 3 staff. I can't do it with 2. That would be a poor ratio. I can't run my older kids groups with 1 staff. I need instructors running things because I want to have trained people running things. I need to have the right amount of lifeguards at the pool. So I disagree. I think that what it would enable you to do is to keep people an extra year. Right. That's the only thing I think.
Yeah, but this is like old school. This is. I
don't think you can cut staff.
This reminds me of like sitting in a college classroom and like the management professor reading the book from 1980 and then reading the new book from 2022. And it's 2 different opinions, and it works for both if you make it work. The system that I'm talking about is you hire the person who's amazing with 6-year-olds, and then when the 6-year-olds are playing with other specialists, they're teaching nature camp crafts to 8-year-olds, and the next period is running basketball, and you have this multi-talented tool who can do 20 things, so you optimize them, which have become harder and harder to find unless you self-develop them, right? Which goes back to pipeline and everything like that.
Yeah,
sure, right?
So it's funny, Jack and I say this very similarly. Like I visited like 36 camps this past summer, like 25 the summer before that. Jack's got like similar numbers, and there's such a stem between the leadership, meaning the owner, the leadership's there, to the kids camp experience, but also to how the staff are managed. And like you put all these best practices in place, but like so much of it goes back to what works for your org, and it's such based on your personality. I think bringing that up though is the perfect segue to the last question. So there's a ton of answers for this one, but I just want to, what I'm showing on the screen and what I'm going to explain to you if you're listening. The question was, what does your onboarding process look like for, what does the onboarding process look like for seasonal staff? And a bunch of people gave these like answers about staff training and everything. And you can run its sentiments kind of estimate when you're doing a Survey Monkey, meaning that it could tell you if it's like a positive answer or a negative answer, or if it's just kind of like cold. And only 14% of people wrote a positive answer when talking about onboarding for seasonal staff. And maybe that's because you're in a rush and you're typing on your phone, or maybe it's the chicken and the egg argument. If you're putting out there kind of neutral vibes or even negative vibes about how onboarding is for your camp, oh, we're just going to get through staff training, this and that. Is that helping the matter? And that's really the last one to share with this group. But
well, I think part of the problem with the camp industry is that most people working in the camp industry have only worked in the camp industry. So they may think that they're doing a decent job at it. But when I hear what Justin went through at Lululemon, and I hear what goes on in the real world, or even my friends that work at like Starbucks or Chick-fil-A, like we do a pretty piss poor job, plain and simple. We're not professional HR people. We're not professionals at onboarding people. We need to be better at this. There's no doubt. And this is one of the reasons that we struggle. So I think this is a good way to put a bow on it.
My was definitely negative up until this year. Now that we have an HR system online, I'm hoping that changes. I'm hoping that this new system, once we get it going, is going to take some of the pain out of that point.
Yeah, people got to fix their vibe on this because no one signed up to work in summer camp full time to be doing this type of work. Like in particular, we're the whole 10 for 2, everyone, hashtag 10 for 2, all that mumbo jumbo, right? But like that, the 10, we have to act like we actually love the 10 as much as we don't all the time. And this, because you can smell the BS. And like I have been at places where people say those lines of like, oh, we just have to get through staff training. It's like, obviously, staff training is not going to be the greatest thing that's ever happened on this property with these people. That's going to happen in a week. But we have to at least act like it's amazing.
Schott, final thoughts. Come on.
People are busy. I get it. You're busy. You've got a lot of stuff going on. But if you want your camp to be awesome, you have to make it awesome. Those are the options. Like there's no, and I love everyone. I know that it's hard. I've worked at Y camps. I've worked at nonprofit camps. I've worked for profit camps. Like it's like at the end of the day, if you want it to be awesome, go make it awesome. And I believe that the staff are what make it awesome. And so figuring out how to make it so your staff have a more awesome time at camp. The onboarding feels better. The staff training feels better. They do a better, all that it's worth figuring out. And this survey to me says mostly like people need to put more energy into making it awesome for staff. And I don't mean buying them like tons of iced coffee or cold brew or like, I don't care. And I don't think that makes people work harder. I don't think that makes them enjoy their job more. Sure, I also like cold brew. And if you bring it to me, I will drink it. But you know what I like better is working with somebody like Justin, who makes me think bigger, who connects with me, who makes me get excited. And so like, it's your job, whoever's listening to this, to make your staff more excited. Enthusiasm is a skill. You can teach it to them, and you teach it to them in the onboarding process. You teach it to them in the interview. You teach it to them when you talk to them. Like when you talk to Justin, it feels like you're drinking through a fire hose and you're excited. And if you're an 18-year-old who might think about working at Everwood Day Camp that you've never heard of, or Starbucks, where you're going to get free coffee, there's a lot of people that are going to choose to work with Justin because he's excited. And if you have a lot of stuff going on your plate, take a deep breath before your interview and show up with a smile and make it seem awesome to be on.
You don't have to have one cult of personality person like Justin. Like that's putting a lot of pressure on your people at your camp. I was talking to a business consultant at a networking thing last week, and they were asking. She asked me a pointed question of like, how do we do it, kind of thing. How do we build a culture with our staff? And I think Jack sort of hinted at it right there, right? Making your staff feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, right? Like the why of why we're doing it. That's our best sell that we have. It really is, right? For these people that live in this world with their cell phones, disconnected, blah, 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 all that kind of thing. They want to be part of something awesome. They really do. And when they work one summer from you and they're like, this is my happy place. Like if you're able to accomplish that, that's what it's all about.
So maybe that's the first question. Maybe that's the first question in your staff meeting that you're having in December with your team is how do we achieve that? What does success look like? How do we back end that to get there? But but also I would also ask all of your 18-year-olds that question instead of asking the 45-year-olds, because Andy, the feeling that you had when you worked at whatever camp you were at 25 years ago is different. It's different now than it was. Cell phones changed the whole world, changed the game. Connection feels different. It looks different. So I would just ask the people.
From the mountain babes. All right, Dan, you want to wrap it up with anything?
Yeah, just the staff survey. You could go, I'll just share that top slide again, but
I'll have this in the show notes for everybody.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And you're going to, if you just popped on LinkedIn for 2 seconds, you're bound to see Jack or
Dan and Jack. taking the mantle from Dan Koenigsberg. Thank you.
Yes. Well, it's you got to find somebody to have a good like race with. And you see Jack does a post, I do a post. It's a good, and then we text each other. It's good. daycampcommunity.com/staff survey. You can fill out the survey. It's the end of December. You fill it out. You get all the data. You can run your own pivot tables. If you need me to show you for 15 minutes how to run a pivot table, I can do that for you. 8 to 10 minutes filled out. And no questions actually like required other than just at the beginning, just to make sure that like some trolls don't fill it out. And then in January 9th, we're going to run a webinar where we dive into all aspects. And we're probably either going to be like a 4-hour webinar, or it's going to be like, I think we're going to split it by overnight day camp, but we're going to figure it out as well too. But that's it.
In the show notes, we're going to have that link to sign up for the webinar as well.
Yes. Yeah. That's all through the staff survey link. So if you go to daycamp.com/staff
survey, so you have to take the staff survey to get the link to the webinar. That's what you're saying.
No, not even that. You could actually just attend a webinar, but I will guilt you into saying, think about the community. You should fill out the survey. So.
Wait, can I say something that's unrelated to all the stuff we've been talking about, but I'll make it seem like it's related?
Yeah.
Me and Justin have been talking a lot about like how to help more awesome 24, 25, 26, 27-year-olds stick around in the camp industry, because there's a lot of work you have to do from the time you're 24 to the time that you're going to be sort of even in the same stratosphere as making money and having the autonomy that maybe your awesome friends would have if they leave the camp world. Right? Like it is a reality that is the case, right? Like if you're awesome and you're 24, you can go work outside the camp industry, go work at Lululemon, go work at whatever, get paid a lot more money, and do some other stuff that feels really good. And maybe that's the right thing to do for you. And Eric Hillis, our friend at Runs Camp Champions, he goes on these like rants about how the best thing you can do in your career as a camp person is make yourself indispensable to your boss. Right? Make your boss believe that you are the absolute best person that could ever have that job. And I think that is the first step. You have to be incredible. You have to show up early, work hard, do all that other stuff. The second thing you have to do is you have to convince a couple of other people that aren't your boss that you're awesome. So that when you want to get your next opportunity, they believe in you, right? And so very tactically, what I want to tell you to do is convince Dan Weir that you're awesome. Be awesome at your job.
Yes.
Be awesome at your job, and then go convince Dan Weir that you're awesome, and he will help you find your next job. He will help you get your next thing. He will introduce you to the next thing. It is a decade-long process. I met Dan in 2012, and Dan has helped me immensely get a million different opportunities. Dan is why I met Andy, which is how I met Sandra, which is how I met Justin. So convince Dan that you're awesome. Be awesome at your job. And there's other people to convince that you're awesome too. Don't get me wrong. You can convince Andy or Justin or Sandra, anyone that knows more people, but I'm using Dan as the avatar. Be awesome at your job. Convince Dan that you're awesome at your job. It is the single best thing you can do for your career if you want to stay in camp.
Yeah. I have a short list right now of like a dozen people that are looking for their next step.
And I'm going to call Dan for this short list because I'm leaving my job happily. I love my camp, but like I need to grow and expand and do things. And I have 6 months to hire, train my replacement, and then say, see ya after the summer.
I think the best part of our industry is the interconnected network of trust, but also peer sharing, and then just vouching for each other. It's a lot to trust somebody with watching 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 children and managing all the staff. And people aren't just going to hire people cold off the street. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're nerding out about day camp, right? Especially if you made it this far into the episode, right? So this is like your passion, and you should be sharing that passion with folks in whatever way you feel comfortable. And there's a million ways to do it. But I firmly believe that. And I'm not going to use my own name, find your mentor / advocate.
Yeah, because we need to pay it forward, and we need to find the next generation of campers to keep this thing going. All right, so I want to thank our friends at Campminder, Camptivities, and Commercial Recreation Specialists for helping us bring this podcast to you. If you like what you hear, you should subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Check out our show notes from all the episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact info for the show, for our guests, Jack Schott, Dan Weir, and Justin Pritikin, and for me and my co-host, Sam Thompson. So thanks for listening and making yourself a better Day Camp Pro. Thanks to the Mets for signing Juan Soto. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Oh, it'll actually be with Eileen Price from the In the City camps in Atlanta. It's a great episode.
She's awesome.
Yeah, terrific. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Day Camp Pod. Adios.
The Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by Go Camp Pro and the Go Camp Pro Podcast Network. Find a podcast for camp professionals of every age and stage at gocamp.pro/podcast. Thanks for listening, friends. Hey, Camp Pros, we love that our industry is built on sharing. In order to foster that spirit, we hope that whenever you share an idea that you learned from the Camp Hacker podcast, conference, summer camp professionals group, or wherever else, that you're quick to give credit where credit is due. That way, we can all encourage more camp pros to share the tips and tricks that will make camp better.